Hey everyone, welcome to another edition of EDTalks. There's so much great content out there, and I appreciate the fact that you've taken a couple moments spent with me. And one of the greatest at putting out awesome content to help you in your career and from a business perspective is Grant McGaugh. Grant, welcome to EDTalks.
Thank you for having me, Ed. And then right back at you. You were on my show a month, two ago. My audience loved you, loved your story, loved what you bring to the table. And then for you to flip it back around and be part of Ed Talks, man, I'm honored.
Yeah, no, Grant, you put out, and I'll let you talk a little bit about it in a second, but you put out great content. You have a newsletter, you have your podcast, you do some live show, I think, on Mondays. So we'll put in the show notes how people can access your website and learn all about Star BDM. But before we get there, tell us a little bit about yourself personally. Like, what are some passions of yours outside of the workplace?
No, that's interesting that you bring that up. I've been in the healthcare, well, let's say healthcare for the last 6, 7 years, information technology for the last 25 years. And I attended DeVry Institute of Technology back in Kansas City when it was known as MIT. So I tell everybody that I went to MIT, and it makes me feel really, really, really smart and good. And I get their attention. But it's a true story. It was actually the Missouri Institute of Technology at the time, but now it's DeVry. But that's okay. A lot of interest I have really is watching innovation take place. I love the fact when I see new technology that could potentially change the way that the everyday person actually goes to work, to actually live their lives. And I got that from my father. My father was what you call a tinkerer, right? I mean, you go to his house, it's like going into Back to the Future type of thing. He's always got some gadget he was working. They called him Professor Gadget. He had all kinds of cool stuff. And he was not just into the future, he also loved the past. And I think that got me like thinking about certain things. So he was one of the first persons I ever saw with a modem that connected to the internet, and it made that wonky sound, and all of a sudden you had AOL. I remember this is like 95 or so. I remember I'm looking at him like, what is that? And this little goofy looking page comes up. I'm like, this is nothing bad. What is that? And here we are today. And are we not, or are we dependent on the internet just for everyday use? Think about it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's no doubt about that. And I know that your dad was very informative in terms of why you got into healthcare and sort of a tragic story, on how you got here. But I'm glad you're here in healthcare. I'm sorry that happened, but I'm glad you're here because the message that you bring is so important, and your passion around, patient advocacy and communication is so critical. So thank you for what you're doing. And that's what I want to jump into now is sort of on the branding side. How did you become so passionate about the importance of branding?
What I found is that, and I've been in business development for a long time, and you've got to be able to tell your story. People are more interested in your story than they are your product or your service or what you're doing for a living, so to speak. They want to know how you overcame challenges, what occurred in your life. And that is how you build reputation. That's how you build a story around yourself and what you do. Going back to what you said earlier, I got into the healthcare field probably about 2016, 2015. And to your point, my father passed away tragically in like 2009, 2010 from a simple broken leg. You're like, a broken leg, right? How does that even happen? And it is a story. I won't go too deep into it at this point. We can read it on my site. But it told me that there are gaps in the healthcare delivery. There are gaps in communication. And if we don't tell the story around this and the importance of the story, it doesn't get fixed, right? As everyone said, the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? And you've got to be a little squeaky sometimes. And what I advise a lot of my clients is for branding, and you've heard this term, it goes all the way back to, I think, Shirley Chisholm, way back in the early 1970s, said, hey, if you can't get a seat in the boardroom, bring a folding chair, right?
Yeah.
The folding chair is your brand. That's how you get in the room. So people know about you. They begin to talk about you when you're not even there. And that's very, very important when decisions are being made and they have to gather resources. You know this, Ed. You've been in
Yeah.
those rooms. We've got to get the right people to do the right things at the right time. Who is your A team? You want to be on that list. And if you're not on that list, a lot of times it's because you're not visible. People don't know about you. And one thing I love about your brand, Ed, is that I know Ed. There's a lot of CIOs out here, right? They've been CIOs for what? You probably know the name of that organization, but you say, well, who's the CIO of that organization? You're like, I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
When you say Ed Barnes, you're like, I wonder which, hospital system he's working for now, or working with now, because you have a brand. That is why it's so important to tell your story, tell it at such a high level that people know who you are, and more importantly, they know what you do and why you do it. That is so important.
Yeah. Yeah. So on branding, as you know, some people are sort of offended by the term or by the fact that you would be even concerned about your brand. What would you say to the naysayers that don't feel like brand is important?
That could have been a nice statement if the year was 1992. You might get
Yeah.
away with that. And then we'll fast forward to 2002, and we'll fast forward all the way to the mobile compute time of like 2010. The reason why is that how do we communicate these days? We're going to communicate these days usually by two things: search and social, right? Now, before you think about all I got to do is go to some networking events, right? I've got to be in some meetings. I've got to maybe send out, make some phone calls, do some email. People kind of want to know me, but that's what you're talking about is a very small circle of influence that you may have, whether it's in your industry or it's in your local market or just within your own organization. That becomes your sphere. Right now, we're in a global communication on the world stage that you have millions and millions of people now tuning in to different types of things, and your attention span is very, very small, right? So the time it takes for you to do the old school way of,
Yeah.
let's say, presenting yourself is now been overcome by mobile compute,
Yeah.
by all these different ways of getting search and social. So I need to know your story. I need, like, Ed Marks, who is that? I'll pop him into my
Yeah.
mobile device, and it's going to come up with a whole list of things. Oh, this guy talks. He's into fitness. He's had some tragedy with cancer. Oh, wow, he's been award-winning CIO. All that's got to come up. If that doesn't come up, people are like, oh, he must be a nobody.
Yeah.
Do you
Yeah.
really want to be a nobody, or do you want to be a somebody within your field? That's the question you have to answer for yourself.
Yeah, that's a great perspective, and another thing, Grant. And I read into this with one particular employer that has since changed with the times, but they were proud not to have a brand, not to be known, and it was even miraculous that I was even recruited there. Like when I was recruited, this is a big organization. I didn't know who they were, and so when I got there, when I learned more about them, and I thought, oh no, this is someplace I gel with and I could help and I could learn from. And when I got there, what I shared with them also is that, look, we're trying to recruit a stellar team. And people, yeah, it's the age of compute, right? And mobile, they're going to look up XYZ. And if we don't pop up and share all the good things that we do, it's going to be hard to recruit people and patience from a business perspective, right? It's like, what organization is this? I've never heard of them, but I've heard of, this big marquee system that's really good at branding. So there's all sorts of good business reasons as well. What are two or three things, Grant, that you would recommend? So if I'm listening and I haven't done much for my brand, I'm like, yeah, I've kind of been sitting on the sidelines, but I hear what Grant's saying. I hear what he's recommending. What are two or three things that the average individual, average leader might do to start working on their brand?
Good, very good question. And I'm going to give you some expert advice on this. Because most people, when you think of brand, you think about visual identity. How am I showing up, let's say, on search and social? Well, you've got to do some homework before that. You've got to get to what I call brand identity. You've got to know who you are and what you are passionate about. What is your true personal mission, vision, and promise? And what does that look like? And have you done the hard work of actually staring in the mirror before you go on the stage? See,
Yeah.
this is before you get on the stage. Who you are and what you're about. And this took me some time to figure this out. You've got to understand your origin story, right? So what do
Yeah.
you mean by that? So what's your origin story? Like every superhero has an origin story, a part where they were mortal. They were everyday. They were like everybody else. They were more or less a commodity in their space. And then something happened. Whether it was Spider-Man, he's in the lab. Or if you really, really unpack what Spider-Man happened, yeah, the lab happened, but it was the death of his father that occurred, I think it was his uncle actually, that
Yeah.
actually propelled him to become the superhero he was. You've got to look into your own life, and I guarantee most people have certain pivots in their life that changed them, that molded them, that gave them a certain type of aptitude and skill set in which they want to hone in on. And here's another piece of advice that someone told me. You are in the best position to be a mentor to the person you were 5 years ago, 10 years ago. That is where you start. That's your
Yeah.
starting point, right? Who was this person? Who was Ed before he had the cancer episode?
Yeah.
Who was Ed when he was in that office? He was really thinking about, hey, they're hiring for a CIO of this organization. I'm working here. Why are they looking at me? I'm going to bust into that office and say, hey, stop your search. Go ahead, hire me. That is a pivotal moment. That's a superhero moment that gets you to where you are now. And you could tell that story. You told that story that happened, many moons ago, but it was your origin story. So you've got to understand your origin story and that those pivotal moments, because people then understand why you do things. And when you read my origin story, you're like, wow, Grant, that happened to your dad. I get that. I see why you're back. Yeah. My enemy, you have to have a nemesis, right? So my nemesis is the healthcare system itself. It's the delivery of healthcare and the way we're doing it now that we need to innovate. We need to change. We need to get better at this. And I'm going to tell this story from my own lens. So when you begin to look at that, people will begin to like, wow, I thought Brandy was this, or I'm just trying to be some social influence or just a thought leader. Like, no, let's step back a little bit and look at your own story, what you're passionate about, why you do what you do, and how does that help others to achieve success.
Yeah, that's great advice, and it requires a little bit of soul searching, a little bit of work, which will have multiple benefits as a result, not just from a branding perspective. But I think what you're sharing, Grant, is just good for the soul, right, and good to understand yourself. You do great work with Star BDM. How do people utilize your services, and how do they best reach you?
Oh, that's great. And this is the part I love is when people they see the things that I'm doing, but the whole point of that is that I reach the audience that says, you know what, I hear what Grant is saying, but I'm not very good at this. I need to get better. Now, remember, I've been in a career salesperson for 25, 30 years. I've been able to tell my story for a long period of time. I get, 9 no's before I get that one yes. But that one yes gets me to the next level. So I understand persistence and consistency and what it takes to be successful in difficult circumstances. So when I speak to individuals, and a lot of my clients are executives like yourself. Like, Grant, I see what you're talking about. I need to develop my brand, but I'm just not sure what I need to do. And I tell them the very first thing, what is your goal? What does success look like for you? What are you trying to reach? You have to think from the end in mind, borrow from Stephen Covey. What does that look like? And then can you visualize yourself in that role? And what does that look like? For instance, I would take someone who's like an IT director And they would come to me and I would talk to them and say, you know what is your goal? I want to be a CIO. So you want to be a CIO? Great. Give me some CIOs you like to be like. I want to be like Ed Marx. Like, you like that? Yeah, I want to be like Ed McGaugh. Okay, that's fine. Let's see what it looks like for you, where your current state is, to get to your desired state, which is like a Ed Marx type platform. And we have to do a skills gap analysis and truly look at that. Not just look at Ed, let's look at some others, 2 or 3 other people on the national scale, so you really see where you're at. When I typically do this, a person will gain confidence because it begins to show them the path forward. It's not just an idea that I have or a lofty goal. They actually see a path to that level of leadership. And they're like, okay, this is what I need to do. The next step is then to blueprint that out into achievable SMART goals or milestones. And these are the tactical elements of a brand blueprint strategy that I lay out for my clients over a 4-week period of time. A lot of people that are on my podcast, that is the end of the rainbow, right? At the end of the rainbow, you see their brand personified, right? So I take you from a point where it's just a muddled idea to now to very crisp and clear brand messaging with a goal in mind. That goal could be career development, it could be business development, depending on where you sit in relationship to what you want to achieve with personal branding.
Yeah, it's great. In all aspects of life, to have someone like yourself. I hearken back to some of the athletics. I could not achieve what I've achieved without someone who sort of coached me along, helped me along, mentored me along in order to achieve that end goal that I had in mind. So what you're talking about is great, because a lot of times too, Grant, as we all know, we all have these ideas like, okay, I'm going to really work on my brand. Awesome. But then work happens, life happens, and you put yourself and your career and your brand on the back burner. I think that's what happens a lot. I think a lot of people, although there's still some people who push back against it, I think it's less and less over time. I think most people fall into the camp of, I know it's important. I hear what Grant's saying. He's absolutely right. And I'm going to get to it. And then they never get to it because of life. And so I highly encourage everyone to really focus on their brand, seek you out, Grant, in terms of having someone to help them and bring some clarity and also a methodology. And then they're going to achieve their career dreams. And then you can apply it, right, Grant? This is not just for your work, which is what we're mostly talking about here, but I think in life in general, it helps you both on the personal side. I'll let you sort of close with any thoughts you had along the personal side, of branding and the benefits that accrue there.
Well, you've hit on the actual heart of the matter, especially when it comes to procrastination. And I encourage people to really take a look at what I just talked about. We're talking about. This is about your purpose, your life's purpose.
Yeah.
And you might be spinning a lot of wheels keeping the lights on, so to speak, your life maintenance. But where are you going? What is the goal? Why are you spending all this energy, and what is the result of all this? We just talked about earlier was, hey, you know what? We're at the end of August. We're going into, Labor Day, starting to look at the end of the year. And I said, hey, this is the time, especially if you come from an agriculture site, this is the harvest time. This is when you reap the fruits of your labor. And you really got to take a look at what have you grown? What have you accomplished over these 8-9 months of the 2024 year? And if you've accomplished great things, kudos to you. And if you want to accomplish even greater things, then you've got to do things a little different. You've got to get to do those tweaks and do those things that champions do. Champions are always trying to get better. At the same time, if you look at your fruits, you label like, wow, that was a bad crop. We just, I didn't grow. I actually lost ground. I'm not doing what I need to do. So you need to ask yourself, if you keep doing what you're doing, are you happy with what you've got? And this goes back to whether you're in business, whether it's a career, whether it's family, whether it's the relationships you have, whether it's the health that you have. Your health care is very, very, very important. All these things are about your brand because your brand is who you are, right? And who I am is what I'm trying to become better at. And if you want to better yourself, you want to lean into that, then you want to engage with me from a personal brand perspective
Yeah.
because you want to bring everything that you are
Yeah.
out and get visible with it. You don't want to be at the end of the day. And I tell you, I'll be very frank with you. And I lost two best friends and my brother within the last year. And what left me with is that at the end of the day, when it's all said and done and the race is over, are you happy with that result?
Yeah.
Because you never know when it's your day and it's your time. And if you're
Yeah.
not working on something that's leaving a legacy for yourself that says something about you, because your brand is your reputation. And what I'm helping you to do is to digitize that reputation and get you to a point where you can be successful. You feel success. You know confidence. I look at that and like, man, I want to be in Paris. I want to be over there. I want to be in the Ironman contest. He's doing so many things outside of what you call your traditional role of a CIO because you believe in yourself and you're bringing everything out. So at the end of the day, you want to leave nothing on the
Yeah.
bench, nothing to tell you. You got in the game. When you come out of the game, you're like, man, I gave it all I got.
Grant, that's a perfect way, I think, to end our time, that you've given it all you got. And the way to get there is to know your brand and accentuate your brand. Grant, thank you so much. I'm going to put in the show notes how anyone can take advantage of the resources you have that I already mentioned, as well as get in contact with you for help in their branding journey. So thank you again for being part of EDTalks. I mean, you're an amazing human. I just love you, man.
Thank you. Likewise, and give your dad a shout out. I saw him throwing out that picture. I'm like, wow, talk about that. He didn't leave anything left to chance. He got out there and did that. That is a dream come true.